The phospholipid bilayer is also known as the cell membrane. It is responsible for facilitating the movement of molecules and ions into and out of cells. There are many different ways that molecules may cross a cell membrane, but first, you must understand the structure of the membrane itself. The membrane is composed of phospholipids, and there are two layers, hence phospholipid bilayer. A single phospholipid is composed of a phosphate head and two hydrocarbon tails. The tails are hydrophobic, meaning they repel water, which is why they are found on the inside of the membrane. The phosphate heads are hydrophilic, meaning they are attracted to water, which is why they are found on the outside of the membrane. This ingenious evolutionary combination of hydrophobic features and hydrophilic features, also known as amphipathic, is why the membrane acts as a barrier. It keeps the cytoplasm in and everything else out. Membrane proteins are vital for a cell to function correctly, and they serve a variety of purposes. Some membrane proteins assist in the diffusion of molecules across the membrane. Protein channels assist in passive transport. Molecules specific to the channel pass into and out of the cell without the use of ATP. Protein pumps assist in active transport. They transport specific molecules into and out of a cell, but it requires one ATP. An example of active transport is the sodium-potassium pump. Protein pumps and channels are examples of integral proteins, or proteins which are embedded in the membrane. They are embedded in the membrane because at least one part of it is hydrophobic. In addition to transport across the membrane, proteins have other functions. Some proteins, such as the receptors for neurotransmitter at synapses, are for cell-to-cell communication. Some proteins are hormone binding sites, such as an insulin receptor. Some proteins are immobilized enzymes with the active sites on the outside, as found in the small intestine. Other proteins are to adhere cells to one another. Proteins are found on the outside of a cell because they are hydrophilic, such as immobilized enzymes. These are also known as peripheral proteins. Cholesterol is a component of animal cell membranes, and only animals, not plants. Cholesterol is a steroid. Cholesterol is also amphipathic. The majority of the cholesterol is hydrophobic, but the 1-hydroxyl group is hydrophilic. This is why cholesterol is positioned where it is.
Ever wonder how nutrients are transported through the cell? Some types of transportation requires energy, and while others don't. These types of energy are known as passive and active transport. No energy. Hey, Mr. Drummond.
Did I interrupt? I'm sorry. The types of passive transport include diffusion, facilitated diffusion, osmosis, and active transport. How can passive transport also include it's active transport? This is going to be the worst video ever. You realize that, right?
Yes.
Okay.
The types of passive transportation includes diffusion, facilitated diffusion, and osmosis.
Let's start with diffusion. Diffusion is the passive movement of molecules traveling to an empty space. Molecules usually travel from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration. No energy is required for diffusion, making this a passive transport.
Let's talk about something even more interesting, facilitated diffusion.
During the process of facilitated diffusion, a larger molecule that is too big to diffuse across the cell membrane freely is transported into the membrane with the assistance of a carrier protein. Facilitated diffusion does not require energy, which makes this a type of passive transport.
Let's talk about a type of passive diffusion known as osmosis.
Osmosis, simply put, is the movement of water from an area of high water concentration to an area of low water concentration through a semi-permeable membrane. In the image, you can see on the left that there is more solute on one side than there is on the other. The solute gives the water something to absorb into, essentially lowering the water concentration. What osmosis describes is the movement of water from an area of high water concentration through the semi-permeable membrane to even out the water concentration. Once the water concentration evens out, the water is still flowing, but at an equal rate. This is known as isotonic.
That leaves us with the very excited active transport.
Active transport is the movement of molecules from the area of low concentration to an area of high concentration, which is exactly the opposite of passive transport. Active transport requires the use of energy to transport molecules from one side of the membrane to the other. An easy way to remember this is to imagine a car going uphill. From low to high, it uses more energy to go up the hill.
Let's dive deeper into the different types of active transport.
There are 3 types of active transport: membrane pumps, endocytosis, and exocytosis. Let's start with membrane pumps. Membrane pumps are a type of protein that moves the molecules to up the gradient. As you can see in the image, the protein pump is helping to assist the molecules to pass through the semi-permeable membrane with the use of ATP. Endocytosis and exocytosis are both a type of vesicle movement. Endocytosis is the process of molecules being taken into the cell. If you want to be more specific, phagocytosis, which is part of endocytosis, is the process of large molecules being taken into the cell. Pinocytosis is when fluids or solutes are taken in. Another way of thinking about it is phagocytosis is eating and pinocytosis is drinking. Exocytosis is the opposite of endocytosis. Exocytosis is the process of which substance is liberated from the cell through vesicles. As you can see in this picture, the vesicle merges with the cell membrane, causing the phospholipids to move around so that it can create an opening for the substance to get pushed out of the cell. In this image, you see the vesicle merging, and then towards the right, you see it push the molecules outside of the cell.
That is all, folks. Have a wonderful time.
Cholesterol is also amphitheatic. Cholesterol is amphipathic. Okay. Cholesterol is amphipathic. The majority of the cholesterol is